This is Tony Hendrick with Painting Spirit. Today I'm going to talk about something I brought up yesterday, which is I was talking and used the term heart-centered several times, so that's going to be my theme, heart-centered. And I think I'm going to do an abstract this morning. So yesterday I was talking about allartworks.net had put on a Zoom chat for the artists that showcase their work in their gallery and online gallery. And the artist who was giving a presentation, his name Dove Talpaz, which I forgot the last name yesterday, so that's Dove Talpaz. And I mentioned that he was coming at the presentation from a heart-centered place, and I think I said the same sort of thing about all artworks being kind of a heart-centered business and curation. They jury their selections for their art on their website, and I just wanted to kind of go into that a little more, because what exactly does that mean, heart-centered? I mean, is it the lovey-dovey heart thing that I'm talking about, or is it something else? And so yesterday I had a friend call me, and he's got a meeting he's setting up with a client, and this was the first time he was going to actually set up a Zoom call on his own. That's kind of neat. Let's see here what happens with the screen. And he wanted to do a little trial test with me. So he set up a Zoom call for me, and it's kind of funny because the time he scheduled it just happened that place where his office is had a fire drill right at the time when our Zoom call was going to happen. That's just kind of a side note, but anyway, he was saying, geez, thanks a lot. I get so nervous when I don't know something like this. I didn't know exactly how this was all going to work, so it really helped out. And I was like, geez, I relate to that. I understand that feeling of not knowing, but doing these painting spirit videos has actually helped me in a way of getting past that need to always know ahead of time. A lot of times I don't know even what I'm going to be talking about until the morning of. When I first started these, I would kind of get really into trying to anticipate what it's going to be and what I'm going to talk about, and part of that is I've gotten into a routine, but also another part of it is just learn to trust that things are going to show up. And today, I'm talking about heart-centered, and I think that really is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about heart-centered. It's coming from the heart and decision-making, as opposed to what we're very often taught to come from, which is our mind, and it's a useful thing for sure. I want there to be that kind of mind-centered formula for when I take a flight somewhere. I want that formula in place so that they know they do this particular thing and that particular thing, and the airplane's going to fly correctly. But it's actually the heart. It's the mind that gets the plane off of the ground with its formulas and its thoughts and its ideas. But it's the heart that says to you whether or not to get on the plane at that particular moment. You've all heard a story of somebody who, I just had this feeling come over me, and I decided not to get on the plane, or something happened and I wasn't able to make my flight. And then, yeah, you've all heard this story, right? So that's kind of what I'm talking about with the heart. And so there's a place of decision making that comes from the heart. And how do you know if you're making a decision from the heart or from the mind? And I think the easiest way to tell for me is the heart is always making a decision in the present tense, right here and now, in the present moment. So there isn't a particular formula that's going to necessarily have some logic to it that makes sense. Other than what I just said, it's always going to be operating in the present moment. Which I guess that's in a way a formula, something you can base it on. That's kind of cool there. What does all this have to do with art? Well, it's the thing that I keep coming at. For, I could be doing these painting demonstrations and have my formulas that I share, but I really don't think that would be very helpful in bringing your painting to life. I think it's when you're making choices through the heart, that's when the painting comes alive. When Dove was giving his presentation, he was showing artwork side by side, so you'd have two slides up at a time, and you'd talk about the work, and very often the two pieces of art were from very, 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 very different genres or not genre, but time periods and cultures. So on first glance, it's like, well, how are these similar? And somebody actually brought up that question. It's a good question, and he explained that we look at art from this linear perspective, or art history. And we think that because of the way we learn art history, that there's this evolution that's going on with art. And I'm not going to get exactly what he was saying because it was his presentation. But from what I took away from it, he was making the point that there's something underlying all of art that is not linear, and that thing that underlies it is present in cave paintings and modern art, and that's what he's responding to in these comparisons. And as he talked about the paintings, you could really see it come to life, why he chose the paintings to be side by side. And it was actually kind of a discovery process for him too. People mention things that he hadn't seen in it, and it was because he just simply was choosing the photos from that heart place, which isn't necessarily something you're conscious of, or you can give a standard or a principle to, and why you make the choice. One of my favorite quotes these days, I came across it from a book in a bookstore up in Marquette. I was visiting our son up in Marquette, and the quote is from Emma Phillips, and it says, "I used to think that the brain was the most wonderful organ in my body. Then I realized who was telling me this." I think that quote fits perfectly with what I'm talking about when I say heart-centered versus being mind-centered. And it's not to say that the mind doesn't have its place, but really it's just acknowledging who's really running the show, and I believe it's the heart. It's what brings life to art. So this painting evolved pretty quick, and I almost want to just leave it right there, but let's see what happens when I change it a bit. The formula that I'm following is sticking with 15-minute videos, so maybe I'll just play with some details here. See what happens. A lot of times I'm doing detail work after the session on some landscapes, and you can see all I'm doing is just playing with what the actual paint is doing. It's very thick there. This is my trusty spatula. And maybe I'll put some blues on top of this. One of the reasons I feel like just leaving this painting alone where it's at is because there's a point where the painting reaches this, the colors kind of have this flow to them, and I know when I get too carried away with the painting, my mind starts to jump in and it flattens it out, because colors like this orange here and that orange there and this yellow here, it kind of creates this space that happens in the painting. And I start to notice these things, and then my mind wants to, start to repeat colors, and it just sort of flattens it out, where that sort of just happened from an intuitive process. Me just flowing with the process. And, afterwards, after that process, I can look at a painting and my mind can start to point at things and talk about them. And it's funny, that's what was actually going on in that presentation that Dove gave, is he made the point in one of these paintings that had a person with a robe on. I think it was an El Greco painting, and there was this shape in the robe and the wrinkles of the robe that was basically echoed in the shape of his jaw, the shadows on his face. And he said that, it's not like this maybe happened consciously when he was painting it. So a lot of times when we're talking about art, looking at a painting and analyzing it with our minds, don't get caught up in the mistake of thinking that that's where that choice came from. That's where formulas start to happen and painting dies. Just because I can notice something with my mind doesn't mean that that's the thing that makes the choices in the painting. So anyway, there's my little talk on heart-centered. See if you can center yourself with your heart today and the choices that you're making, and get out your own brushes and play around with that. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday.